guys, gals, and non-binary pals? I'm Justin Alexander, and last month I had COVID. I brought it home from Gen Con with me. Fortunately, went into quarantine, didn't get anybody else sick, only had to cancel a few events. But then a couple weeks after that, and in the last couple of weeks, my executive manager, my camera operator, my video editor, my wife and my daughter, and also myself, have all either had COVID again or went into quarantine because of COVID exposure. And so things have been kind of crazy over here. As a result, this video is going to be old school webcam. Hope you'll bear with me. In addition, we're also going to be talking about how to schedule your games when it seems like the whole world has gone mad and is absolutely adamant that you'll never get to roleplay again. Okay, when you're scheduling your games, there are three types of scheduling you can do. The first is regular, the second is ad hoc, and the third is open table. Now, when we talk about regular scheduling, we mean that you have your game happening at the same day and time on a regular basis. Now, that regular basis might be weekly or monthly or bi-weekly. You know, when I was in elementary school, I actually used to play twice every day, 5 days a week. So it's really all about what's right for your group and your game and your present circumstances. Now, the advantages of having a regular game schedule like this is that you don't have to think about it. You know, you and the rest of your group can put those days and dates on your calendar from now until eternity, and it is set, you know, more or less in stone. And that's great for you. There's less complications about that. It also means that the other people in your lives, your significant others, your families, those people can also adjust their schedules and expectations around the knowledge that, hey, you know, every first Saturday of the month, Steven's going to be playing his game, right? Now, the downside, the con of having a regular schedule like this is that life will happen, you know, graduations, weddings, funerals, dentist appointments, and not all of these things are going to be able to adjust themselves to this regular game schedule. You know, I know we play every first Saturday of the month, but I'm going to literally be out of the country, so it's just, you know, it just can't happen this month. And as a result of this, as a result of life happening, when you have a regular schedule like this, you're going to have, you know, more cancellations and more absences, just as a natural result. And so maybe one of the solutions you might look at is to have ad hoc scheduling instead. And this is when you get together with your whole group, your 3 or your 4 or your 5 players, and you say, hey, when is everybody available to play? And you look at the dates you have available and you know, schedule what works. Now, if you're going to do this kind of ad hoc scheduling, the one recommendation I do give you is that you should try and be at least a month ahead. So for example, if it's the beginning of September and you don't have any dates scheduled in October yet, I would be trying to schedule those dates in October here at the beginning of September. And the reason for that, it's really easy to get into a situation where people's schedules beginning to fill in with sort of the ephemeral things of life. And then you suddenly discover you don't really have a big block of time that you all mutually have available, you know, to play a 4 or a 6-hour game or whatever length of game you and your friends are playing. Whereas, again, if you get about a month out, in my experience, month and a half out, it becomes a lot easier to find those big blocks of time. And then once you have those set, everybody's schedules, that ephemera of life, can kind of fill in around it. Now, there's a couple different ways you can kind of schedule these sessions. The first is to schedule in person, usually when you're at a game session. The other way is to send out an email with a list of dates. And the list of dates will be 1 date per line. And I'll say, hey guys, here's all the dates that I'm available. Delete the ones that don't work for you and mail the rest of them back to me. And then, of course, I will get back, you know, 3 or 4 or 5 different lists. I'll take a look at the lists, figure out which dates we have in common that work for everybody. And then I'll email back and say, great, these are the 2 or 3 however many days you're looking to schedule. These are the dates that we're going to be able to meet. And I do recommend telling people, don't tell me what one day works for you, because you get a whole bunch of back and forth. Make sure that they're going to send back all the days that work for them, and then you can do that cross-referencing. Now, the other thing I do recommend as well is that you always try to have 2 upcoming dates on the calendar, particularly if you are scheduling your dates in person. One of the advantages of scheduling your dates in person is that it's just a lot easier if you're sitting at the table with everyone to kind of sort things out super quick, rather than having that longer back and forth email process in which people's schedules can change while they're waiting for an answer, and there can be weird complications from that. So it is easier to do it in person. But if you are going to do it in person, I do recommend trying to have these 2 upcoming dates ahead on the calendar. In other words, if I'm playing the game on a Wednesday night and I look at my calendar, I say, hey, we've only got 1 more game session scheduled, then I'm going to want to schedule more game sessions at that point. I'm not going to want to wait to the point where we don't have any dates on the calendar, because a couple things. There's a real possibility that people will end up canceling that session for a number of reasons. Maybe they catch COVID, for example, and then we don't get together, and then we don't have anything on the calendar, and maybe it takes us a while to realize we don't have anything on the calendar, so then we eventually do get around to scheduling, and suddenly that one cancellation can end up really stretching out into a much longer and more complicated affair. So those are my recommendations when it comes to ad hoc scheduling. Now, the advantages of ad hoc scheduling like this is that obviously it adapts to the schedules of you and your players. This is actually the method I use to schedule most of my game sessions. A large chunk of the players that I play with come from theater. And in theater, we are constantly juggling an ever-shifting rehearsal schedule, production schedule, auditions, all of that, and it's never a set schedule for any of these people. So trying to commit to like, hey, we're going to play every first Saturday of the month, well, that's great, except that most of those first Saturdays somebody might have a show. So we need to kind of carve out the times that we can make work. And that's true for anyone, any adult with a busy schedule. In my experience, it's just easier to find these ad hoc dates rather than trying to expect regularity from schedules, which in the modern world can be anything but regular. Now, the disadvantages of having ad hoc scheduling like this is that it can be a lot of extra hassle. I mean, obviously, I just talked for a good long while about all the different logistics of trying to make this the most efficient and accurate and effective method for doing these schedules. All of that is the hassle that we're talking about, and obviously that is a drawback to this method. Now, the third sort of type of scheduling is open table. And with open tables, you don't actually need to coordinate your schedules at all. Instead, what you do is you have a pool of players. Generally, you want it to be a little bit larger or significantly larger than the players that you are comfortable having at the table. So for example, if you're comfortable running for 4 players, you might want 6 or maybe 8 or maybe even 12 players in your player pool. And what you do is you send out an email to everyone in the player pool and you say, hey, we're going to play next Tuesday. Anybody who can show up will be playing. Now, the pros of this approach is that more casual players can play, whether those are people who just don't have a lot of time available for role-playing, or maybe even people who are out of town and only occasionally visit and are in town and are available to play with you. All of those people who otherwise you wouldn't get to play with, those people can now play with you, which is super cool to be able to still be able to play role-playing games with people who maybe have less time to do it now, both for them and for you. You also get to play more often because your schedule for playing is not dependent on a specific group of people being available. As long as some percentage of that player pool is available, you can play as often as you like. Every Tuesday, twice a week, whatever you're comfortable playing, you can do that. I mean, assuming you're the game master. Now, the disadvantages of an open table is that it is in fact a completely different experience from a dedicated table. There are different types of adventures, different types of campaign structures, different ways of handling time, different ways of handling how the different characters interact with each other, different ways of pacing individual sessions, all of which make it unique and special compared to the more sort of dedicated experiences that I think a lot of the people watching this video and most people playing role-playing games today are used to playing. It's different, it's still good, it's just different, and you have to think about that a little bit if you're planning to do any kind of open table play. Now, we will be doing a video more dedicated to open tables and how to run them and how to manage them and how to take best advantage of them in the future. I'll also be including a link to the Open Table Manifesto in the font of all knowledge down below, so check those out. It's a lengthier conversation to have about some of these details, but it does have an impact on scheduling, which is why I wanted to bring it up in this video here. Now, those are the types of scheduling. You have the regular scheduling, the ad hoc scheduling, and the open table scheduling, but there is sort of another half to the scheduling equation, and that is what your attendance policy is going to be. And broadly speaking, there are kind of 2 different types of attendance policy. The first is what I refer to as mandatory attendance, which just means that unless everybody can be at the session, then you don't play the session. If, for example, Jessica can't be here this week, then that means we just don't play the campaign because obviously Jessica needs to be here, right? And the pros of this approach is primarily continuity. If you don't play unless everybody's available, you don't have to try and juggle some of the difficulties like, okay, well, if Jessica isn't here, what does that mean for her player character? Also, even if we come up with a solution of where her player character is, or maybe somebody else plays her character, the other thing we have to deal with is that when Jessica herself comes back, when the actual player comes back, we need to deal with the logistics of telling her all the things that happened during the previous session, and that's an extra layer of potential headache as well. The other pro of having mandatory attendance is it does set an expectation of attendance. Jessica will know that if she cancels on us, it means nobody gets to play the game. She has a social obligation. We all have a social obligation to each other to be there, because otherwise we're taking something away from the entire group. Whereas if Jessica thought, well, it's okay if I cancel, everybody else can still play, she might be a little less motivated to actually show up for every game session. And so we wouldn't have that expectation of attendance. Now, the disadvantages of mandatory attendance, obviously, is that if even one person has a conflict, I mean, I don't want to pick on Jessica too much here, but, if Jessica has a dentist appointment, or her daughter is graduating, or she's taking a vacation, if she's not available, none of us get to play, and that's kind of a big con. And so you just get to play less often. So one way to deal with not wanting to cancel as often is to use the other type of attendance, which is minimal threshold. And basically the idea here is that we don't need everybody to show up, but we do need a certain number of people show up in order for the session to be viable. So maybe if you have 5 players in your group, if one of them can't make it, that's fine. If 2 of them can't make it, that's fine. But if that third person doesn't make it and now we're selling down to just 2 players, maybe that's the point where we say, okay, we're going to cancel. The pros of having just a minimal attendance threshold for playing is obviously you end up with fewer cancellations, which means you do get to play more often, which means that the campaign has more forward momentum and all of that. The cons, on the other hand, is that you have to deal with some of those logistics that we were talking about before. What do you do with the PCs of the missing players? And also, you have to deal with the fact that at this point, people begin to believe it may be okay to skip. Again, to pick on Jessica, she may think, I'm not really feeling it today, and it's okay for me to skip because we have this minimal attendance policy. It's almost like I have permission not to show up for the session, right? And the key problem with that is that regardless of what type of scheduling you do, regardless of what your attendance policy is, there is kind of a core secret when it comes to any scheduling of role-playing games. And that is that people have to believe that the session is going to actually happen. The moment when people don't believe the session is going to happen, and the primary reason for that is because there's been a lot of cancellations, they don't take the commitment seriously anymore. And it makes sense, right? Like, if you've canceled 3 out of the last 4 sessions and people are looking at their calendar and somebody says, hey, can we get together this weekend? And they're looking at their calendar and they're saying, well, I do have this game session scheduled, but it almost always cancels, right? So, you know what? Yeah, I'm available. I'd assume it's not my fault we canceled this time, or maybe it is my fault, but really maybe that's fair because other people caused us to cancel other times. And once you get into that, you end up with more cancellations, obviously. And of course, the more cancellations you have, the more people feel like they have permission to not come to the sessions, which leads to more cancellations, which leads to more people feeling that the game isn't going to happen, which leads to, and you can see the kind of death spiral that you can very easily get into. Now, if you feel like your campaign has entered this death spiral where people no longer believe that the game session is going to actually happen, there are a few solutions that you can pursue. The first solution is to have a backup game. So you have like a primary campaign. Maybe you're playing a D&D campaign with 5 players. It's a dedicated campaign. You want all the players to be there in every single session. You're using mandatory attendance policy. What happens if one player doesn't show up? Well, rather than canceling the whole session and saying, well, we're not playing anything, instead say, okay, well, everybody else can still come over and, we can play a mothership game or a feng shui one-shot. Having that backup game in your pocket is a great way of making sure that people are still engaged and getting a chance to play, and in a certain sense, believing that the session will happen. One thing to note, of course, about this is that this backup game has to be more of a beer and pretzels affair. By its very nature, it is the game that you are playing when one of the players is missing. Therefore, it has to be a game where you are okay with one or more of the players being missing. Now, open tables that we talked about a little bit earlier, these are actually great for this because the entire concept of an open table is that you have this invite where anybody can come and play that evening. Well, that also applies, within the limited player pool of a single dedicated group. Doesn't matter which of those 5 players shows up, you'll be able to run your open table. Again, we'll talk about that more in a future video. So the backup game is one way to kind of make sure that people still feel like this event's going to happen. I should still set aside time for it. Even if something unexpected happens and somebody has COVID, or somebody has a daughter who has the flu, or somebody is unexpectedly called out of town because of a tragedy, if any of those things happen, I'll still get to be there with my friends and play the game, right? The second solution to this sort of death spiral is to reset expectations. And this is just a matter of getting together with your players and saying, look, we have this situation where I feel like all of us don't have a lot of confidence in the game happening each week. That's unfortunate. There's been kind of a bad string of illnesses or conflicts, or the case may be. But we really need to get into a place where we are able to believe that the next session is going to happen, and we need to all make a commitment to be there for each other and for the game. It's not a super hard conversation to have. You just have to take the time to have it. I do recommend having it in person if you can, via email if you can't. But however you choose to have this conversation, it doesn't take a lot. And oftentimes it's just enough to send a signal to everybody and to have everybody make that fresh commitment to the game. Of course, then the trick is that you and others need to make sure that the next 3, 4, 5 sessions actually do happen, because that's how you get that momentum going again, and you can get that campaign back on track. The third solution is to change your attendance policy. So if you are running a mandatory attendance policy, for example, where you cancel the minute anybody drops out, maybe the solution is to switch to a minimal threshold for your attendance policy. And maybe if Jessica doesn't show up, I'm so sorry, Jessica. If Jessica doesn't show up, that's fine, because we've changed our attendance policy. Now we will still play even if Jessica can't make it. Now, conversely, it may be the other way. You may actually already be playing with a minimal attendance threshold, but you have a situation where that's led to people being like, I'm just not going to show up because I know they'll play anyways. It's only affecting me, not others, even though really it is affecting everyone in the group, right? So maybe the solution to that problem is to actually switch to a mandatory attendance policy, so that everybody's kind of like, oh, no, it actually is a big deal if I don't make it, because it is a big deal if you don't make it. And maybe you pair that with a backup game. There's different mixes to all of this, obviously. The fourth solution to this death spiral may be to actually kick a player out. If somebody isn't actually committed to the game, and that's causing disruptions to everybody else's ability to enjoy or even to play the game, then it may be a situation where you say, hey, maybe this game isn't the right fit for you. Maybe this schedule isn't the right fit for you. One of the great things that you can do is to have an open table where that player could still potentially engage with the group and play with you on a schedule that's more conducive to their actual expectations, to their actual ability to commit, given wherever they are in their life right now. That's one of the great things about having sort of backup games and open tables, where you don't have to have this super aggressive commitment from every single person you want to play games with in order to play games with everybody who's interested in playing games with you. And throughout all of this, throughout the different types of scheduling, the different types of attendance policies, the different solutions to groups that are maybe being a little bit shaky in how often they can get together, through all of this, it's really important to remember that the goal is to play awesome games with your friends. And effective scheduling is just one means to that end. Good gaming. This is Justin Alexander, and I'll see you at the table.